All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
We have Memory of Light. It is Wednesday, so it is Wheel of Time. This one might be a little shorter. We're only going to do three chapters. Uh, every time I say shorter, though, we ramble. So we'll get to comments first, and then we start with, well, almost Matt with Fortuana. And I think we got some good stuff to talk about in this chapter. It's not quite the worst Matt yet, but
Not
there,
yet,
but
but
there's
he's
actually a
working on
really
it.
good Matt moment that I want to go over probably in a little more
Mhm.
detail because we're going to say accident, Jordan, or Sando.
Hmm.
We're going to play that game.
Okay. Well, I'm curious what the incident is that you're referring to. So let's get to it. Comments first. Uh, yeah. First up for my deals, the whole Bow the Wild business was strange. It couldn't have been Rand because he couldn't have been in two places at once. And why would he need a second calendar? It's clearly intended as a parallel, not complementary. On the other hand, I don't think Bow the Wild was a setup specifically because of Sarkonin. I don't remember what that is. Is that
It's his
the
sword.
thing he's wielding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that was a thing. That's how forgettable the whole. I mean, strange in that it is so built up and yet so forgettable. I didn't even remember the whole second Calendar thing.
Yeah, and you could
Um,
have even semi set that up by having Demandred wear a weird sword that the other Forsaken comment on
yeah,
every
yeah,
time. It's like that like they can tell it's non-Grail or something.
yeah. And as Ideal says, how hungry and desperate the Forsaken were for Ongril and Songgril, they wouldn't just let it sit there if they had prior knowledge about it. Well, maybe except to Shamael because he kind of doesn't give a shit and is above it. But that attitude only fully comes after he becomes Morden, which is a good point. When he has Balsamon, he's still um proactive, but I don't remember who it is. It may be Demandarid or no, because we don't get a lot of Demandarid point of views. It actually, I think it may be Ravine in one of the Ravine points of view we get. That he has this thought that Ishamael. It's where Jordan basically kind of tells us without telling us that Balsamon was a Shamael pretending to be the Dark One, or kind of portraying the Dark One's avatar. And then Ravine has this thought that at the end he might have actually thought he was the Dark One because he was that crazy,
Hmm.
that he had been going that nuts. Um, and so there is a difference there between how Ishamael acts as Balsamon and how he acts as Moradin, which is a good thing to keep in mind and to point out. Um,
Well, I mean, he was in an interesting situation when they were in stasis because remember he slowly came out and everybody else
mhm.
came out all at once, and he was actually halfway trapped the whole time, and
Which is
so he
how he
was
was able to influence the world, where it's hinted at, and I think in the big white book, it's more explicit, where it explains that he was able to project himself out into the world,
yeah, they talk about him
kind
starting
of.
the Trolloc Wars
So
as
he
a
started the
projection.
troll.
He-
Exactly. He
but that
started the
means he had a
Trolloc
foot in
Wars.
both worlds, so he was
Uh-huh.
he was basically a conduit for the Dark One to have influence over the
Hmm.
world, and you spend 3,000 years that way. You might start to begin to think you are the thing that
Yeah.
you're a conduit of.
Yeah. Um, let's see, where was I? Because wasn't he tried to get a hold of Kalendor himself? I know what's his face, the guy we barely see because he gets killed so quick. Who was the guy in
Dalal,
tier? Bilal.
Dalal, yeah.
Bilal was because only the dragon could actually go through the wards and take Kalendor. So he for sure was goading Rand into taking it because he wanted to kill him and take the sword. In fact, we're told that explicitly. I think Morden thought he could do the same as well, or Balsamon thought he could do the same as well. Because that seems to be what he's trying to do there when he comes out of the shadows and attacks Rand. let's see. So why not just have a Sarkarnan if he set it up? It seems like a genuine thing. Guestamandred was meant to be Bal the Wild, and his soul returned to the wheel. He will have an opportunity to be his asshole self again. In Shara, no less. He lost Eliana to lose Theron, and then Passport Bro to Shara for secondhand Eliana and secondhand Chosen One. That's brutal, man. I hadn't thought of it in those
Well,
terms before, but I love
so
that secondhand Chosen One.
people have been talking about the thumbnails not coming through well. I'm going to bring
Hmm.
up the one from the last one because I didn't even read that comment because it wasn't there yet when I made the when I had the meme, but I found this one for the Mandrid with Bender from Futurama.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And since they're hard to read, where'd I put it? Intro. There it is. Open. So it's supposed to say, if you couldn't read it, there's already a dragon. Well, I'll fulfill my own prophecies with Sharans and slaves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Boy, Bender. And with just a little bit more setup, because I don't remember who it is who says, it may be Demandred talking to Simir Haj and Masana in their little cabal of somebody makes the comment in one of those dark one or forsaken tea parties that when I think about where the two of you have set yourselves up, I wonder how much the Great Lord has known for how long. Actually, no, it's not Masana because it is somebody talking to Simmer Haj and Demandred. I think it may be Masana, may be the ones saying
She
this.
was the third in that
So
tryst. So
yeah, and so uh Shamael brags that he is the one who whispered in Hawkwing's ear and sent part of his armies across the sea to start Seanchan, and then they insert Simmer Haj there after kind of setting that up. So it's not hard for me to believe that Ishamael in his Balsamon guys would set up even something as big as a song reel, even if he would have preferred it for himself. I could see him setting that up in his Balsamon avatar in that
mhm.
guise as doing, sprinkling in a little bit here and there to set that up, playing the long game, which they clearly are. Um, but it just a few more hints because the Sharans really are kind of a meh. It's like, oh well, okay, here they are now. I don't know. I have yet to talk to any other nerd who thought it was cool, who liked it, who thought it was executed well. It's all kind of okay.
Well, I think part of it is it was overcomplicated. If
Hmm,
you're going to introduce something at the last minute, don't have this super complex society.
that too. Yeah.
Just have them be, kind of semi-normal in structure, but they had this prophecy that Demandry took advantage of
Hmm.
and made them do bad things because big groups of people do bad things because of religions a lot of times, right?
Yeah. And don't make them so alien. Like there's one part there that works well and is a neat little world building note in that part where from Egwene's point of view where she's watching the Sharans and she has that observation that she assumed the bigger, more complicated your tattoo, the higher your rank, and it was actually the opposite, and that you could fall and you could never be redeemed because you could always have more tattoo added and you couldn't take it off. So that was an interesting little tidbit of world building that gets lost because it is such a weird, alien, complicated thing. If you would have had little nuggets like that within a more recognizable system, within something, say, that maybe paralleled the Seanchan a little bit more, to use that as kind of your anchor in the world, it it would have helped that reveal land better, I think.
Well, and it's a system that doesn't even make sense. If there's an only downward mobile, which means if you're at the bottom, you stay at the bottom, and if you're at the top, you can fall to the bottom, but there's no way to go the other way, you're eventually going to run out of tops. I mean, that's just physics, not physics. That physics used euphemorically, you
Mhm.
know? It's
All right. Lanfear trying to seduce Perrin, blah, 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 is her being her. She can't help herself. If you somehow get past her beauty and fooling yourself that maybe, just maybe, she likes you and you have a chance, which is almost impossible to get past, this behavior becomes repulsive. It's like overhearing the wild tin you fell for confess her love to some other dude and use the exact same words she used on you an hour ago. Revolting, it's all BS. And I was at that point with Lanfear. I think it was the intention.
is this,
Um,
this is where cross-sex mind reading comes in. Because if you've ever dealt with a female with borderline personality disorder, one strength we have as humans is that we actually are very good at lying to ourselves. And some people do it inherently, and that's why they're so successful. The most successful liars believe their own tale. Just because she can switch that tale in her head from one guy to the other on a whim doesn't mean that in that moment she doesn't believe her own tale for one reason or another. And I kind of gave a backdrop of what would be a believable tale in her head. That, oh, I didn't want Rand anyways. I want revenge.
mm.
And what better way? And this is the best person for me. So it's this is why Al Bundy says don't try to understand women because women hate each other. Right? Because this is men do it too, but women are masters at it. If you ever got a glimpse at the story inside the head of the female you're talking to in a romantic situation, it is not what you think it is. And yeah, that's where I was coming from. So
Yeah.
so yes, on the outside, your explanation is right, but in her head, it's different.
Well, and we have seen her ability to rationalize anything,
Mhm.
especially when herself is
She
involved.
rationalized joining the greatest evil the world has ever seen by choice. I mean, once you can do that, you can rationalize, flirting with a guy to get your way.
Scott weighs in on the Shard storyline. Didn't care for it much. I wish I knew if this was what Jordan intended or if it's Sanderson's invention. Because in hindsight you can look back and you can see the couple of little nuggets he gave to point towards Shara, uh, generally and with Demandred specifically. I suspect this was a part of the notes, but just from this reread, it seems to me in this book at least that the scenes that have Jordan's fingerprints most prominently are the Rand scenes. And it would make sense to me that those are the ones he would have spent the most time on when he knew his time was very limited and his energy. From what I understand, amyloidosis just kills your energy, right? Because you, you
Mhm.
you don't have the ability to your body starts to lose the ability to function because your electrolytes crash is what it is, isn't it?
Something
Is
like that. But
yeah.
yeah, it also has to it's a similar mechanism to what eventually leads to Alzheimer's too. So I don't know what the connection between that disease and the amyloids
Mhm,
themselves are, but the it seems like it was one of those things in the notes that maybe Jordan had an idea in his head,
mhm.
and he said the October reveal is going to be the Sharans that surprised the army, and Sando was like, okay, cool. That's actually really cool. And then for 2 books, forgot about it. And then was like, oh, crap. I got to get him in somehow. Yeah.
So busy setting up what the
So busy doing stupid banter with Matt in his head
yes,
that
well,
took
that.
hundreds of pages of text to.
How much time was spent? I mean, that was one of the things we griped about in that first book was it wasn't just that Matt was so bad, it was how many pages he spent with Matt and that town and Varen. So much time that could have been significantly condensed, if not cut out altogether, to give us more important things. To, and to your point, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, yeah, the Sharans. Well, here they are. Got them in. Check
Because
that box.
yeah, it does make sense to have this thing that you knew about that was part of the world, because remember, the Dark One versus the Creator is should include the entire world.
Hmm.
It makes sense that they should be involved in some way. And that's actually the best place to put a surprise army for the armies that are fighting the dark, because you're not even thinking another human army. You're thinking just Trollocs at that point, because there's really no human dark friend army. That which actually that could have been another thing that came in here, a human dark friend army that had been recruiting
Hmm.
all along.
Hmm.
But it's it is a good mechanism for having that, to where it turns the tide of battle, which you needed to have a dramatic battle story,
Hmm.
but you did have to set it up more. You couldn't just
Yeah.
have it come out of nowhere. I mean, especially with the culture thing. This whole that we can't you're not allowed to pass the walls when you go trade there and all of this stuff. That actually made it worse, because now you're cramming all this in your head, and you just don't care. After Gawain had that thought about the tattoos, I haven't thought about tattoos one bit. I'm just
Hmm.
like, oh, big bad army that has human channelers. Okay.
Hmm. Um, Scott appears to be disagreeing with you, Sam.
Oh.
A katana used by a trained fighter cuts incredibly easy, almost like an episode 4 lightsaber takes off an arm with hardly any effort. The problem there is the hardly any effort, because yes, the way the blade is structured, it is designed in the same way that if you've got a nice curved high quality kitchen knife, you let the blade slide through and kind of rock through on that angle, because all you're doing is you're changing that very small pressure point. So you've got a lot of, pounds per square half inch. I think what you were griping at, though, is that Gawain cut off an arm one-handed with basically just the flick of a wrist.
Mhm.
And that is why a katana can cut through bone. It's still difficult. And it's the trained fighter part is the other thing too. If you watch them when they roll up those mats that do become dense enough to simulate bone, and a trained master can cut through those pretty easily. But look how he's doing it, two-handed with a
And they
big
set up
like
it's like saying an athlete's vertical jump is how high they can jump in the game, right?
yeah.
It's not the same. But also I wish I when I read the comments, he hadn't commented yet, or I would have had it ready. There's a video of samurai masters testing their skill and who can cut through the most. I thought it was
Mm-hmm.
bamboo, but it might have been those mats you're talking about all rolled up, and they weren't getting very far.
Mm-hmm.
These were
There,
the
there
the
are
best of the best of the best in the world competing in this contest, and one of them maybe got through two and a half.
now the quality of the blades were somewhat suspect, because sometimes they were legit blades passed down through families, and sometimes they were modern mass produced, not as good. But there are some pretty horrible stories from World War II of Japanese officers having contests to practice beheading prisoners, and they didn't make it through. They didn't always make it through. In fact, often they didn't make it through.
Mhm.
So it was pretty icky.
Yeah, so,
But they
my
were
point on
evil
that is
psychos.
these are considerably the best of the best in the world, and I'm assuming if you're the best of the best, I don't know, what are you, kendo master or whatever, at that point, you're going to have one of the best of the best swords.
Hmm.
And you said it simulated bone, but that would be human bone.
Hmm.
So if they're barely making it through a couple of these, a Trolloc bone's going to be more, plus the extra flesh on top of it. And
Hmm.
again, two-handed with preparation and all of their body weight into it, not holding a shield, not rocking back on your feet, trying to get position on a hill. You know, I mean, all of these things. So it's the average sports movement is zero point 0.2 seconds. The average muscle contraction at maximum takes about 0.6 seconds.
Hmm.
These guys that are setting up get the whole 0.6 seconds. You doing it on the battlefield, unless your opponent is prone and you're coup de graceing them, you got that 0.2 seconds. So it's yeah, again, when you know physics and biomechanics and physiology, you hate all action movies, but
Hmm.
it's it, it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah. Um, the Aes Sedai, especially the Green Jaw, know almost nothing of battle, the consequences of them sitting on their asses in the tower instead of helping the world. That is a good point, but it is a point that we see from Jordan in his last writings because we get that exactly from the head of the Green Ajah when the Seanchan are attacking the tower. And we get that brief scene of her point of view when she stumbles upon Egwene.
yeah, it
And
starts with an E. Her name, I can't
yeah,
remember what it
and
was.
she's thinking, this is no way. I mean, she's the battle leader, but all she can do is flee. She has no idea what to do. She doesn't know how to fight these people. You can learn very quickly when it matters, when your life depends on it. I suck at gardening because I do it because I'm an idiot and it's a hobby, unlike my grandparents and great grandparents who literally had to do it if they wanted to eat,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can learn pretty quick when your life depends on it. And so I think
Yeah, but pretty quick
they're
is
learning.
relative because you watch these Survivor shows where these people are highly trained in Survivor, ability, and then they get thrown
Yep.
out naked and afraid, and they're finally getting it down by the 21st day, and they're emaciated and almost dead. It's
Yeah, that is something we talk about when we talk about fitness is the difference between practical or between theory and practical.
mhm.
Is that practical can get pretty hard. Um, but that is also why Egwene needed to be Egwene. And that is that again, back to the whole reason we're doing this is because the book series works for the reason that the TV series doesn't, because it sets things up. Egwene as Amarillin during the last battle when fighting would be so paramount, and she was for a time a domine. That
Well,
matters. I mean,
we'll
there's
get
a
to that in this
reason.
book. In
Yeah,
this,
there's a reason she was set up, and there's a reason it works, and it's we're getting it. The first little glimmer of it was you have the spark, not only can you learn, you will learn. You have the spark and you're really powerful.
well, and on
Um,
the flip side, sometimes you learn by losing. We had Nynaeve. She
mm,
fought Moghedien twice. They're like, oh, she's a legend because she beat a Forsaken. That wasn't the first time they met. She got her ass kicked the first time,
mhm,
and she made sure she did the things to be ready for the next time.
yeah. Sanderson likes to write about battle, but Jordan actually lived through battles. It seems to make him reluctant to expand on the gore and glory and instead deal with the thoughts of our characters, which, again, back to that first
Mm.
interview off the wiki. And I keep going back to that because the more we go through the last battle from Sanderson's point of view, the more obvious that point that RJ made in that interview stands out.
Well, and also the second part of that is something we haven't touched on as much, although we have mentioned it before. It's also one of Sanderson's weaknesses to understand other people's thoughts.
Mm,
He's not very good at understanding the thoughts of not Sanderson.
yes.
Where which having a job like I do, where you work with people on a personal basis all the time, that took a long time to be able to have a level of knowledge and empathy combined to read people and know what they're going through based on what they tell you and how they look, and then putting it all together.
Hmm.
So, and you still can't say what's in their head. You just have a better idea of it. And Jordan was better at that.
Well, that was also a good point you made last week or the week before when you first made that point, and it really stands out with the sections and the chapters that I point out that I think are really good or his best work are so often characters that we have either very little or no point of view of. And then Sanderson is able to write those because he doesn't, to him as a fan, these are real people. So he's got to figure them out. He has to figure out who is Matt, who is this person, and he can't. But someone like Androl, which is a complete invention of himself, he is the person. So he can know who that is much more intuitively, much more deeply, and it shows in the writing. All right. Any other thoughts before on we go to chapter 24?
On we go.
All right. So, I was actually looking forward to this one, um, because it is a Tuan point of view, and I think Sanderson writes Tuan well. I think he writes the Seanchan pretty well in general. Um, and then he couldn't help himself, and we got into some buffoonery, and it's really annoying because there's actually something interesting here in this section. Um, so it's page 432 in the first edition hardback that I'm using, and it's the first thing that jumped out at me was a couple pages in on page 434. Um, Tawan has this thought that as she's watching Matt organize and give orders in a clownish way, but let's leave that for a second. Matrim baffled the blood. That was good, as it kept them off balance. But he also represented disorder with his random ways and constant stabs at authority. Fortuana represented order, and she had married chaos himself. What had she been thinking? Um, the problem is what he's doing isn't chaotic, it's just silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's this very interesting thought here from Tuan. It is fully in keeping with what we knew of her from what we saw from the outside looking in, and then the few points of view we get from Jordan in Knife of Dreams. This is fully in keeping with her character. The problem is it is telling, not showing, because what Matt is doing, even from her point of view, isn't really chaotic. It's just loud.
Mm-hmm.
And then later down the same page, when um Captain General Golgan rides up, and she's looking at him and thinking about him, and so there's this interesting compare and contrast between General Matrim Cawthon and Captain General Golgan, who is this member of the blood and lifelong general as well. So we have seen that he is equally competent in both the politics and the generalship.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tawan has this thought about him as she's looking at him. Fortuana steeled herself as Captain General Galgan rode up. He wore black armor rather than a uniform like Matt's, and he wore it well. Commanding, almost towering, he was her greatest rival and her strongest resource. Any man in his position would be a rival, of course. That was the way of things, the proper way of things. Matrim would never be a rival. She still did not know how to think of that. A piece of her, small but not without strength, thought she should have him put away for that very reason. Was not the Prince of Ravens a check upon the Empress to keep her strong by providing a constant threat? A woman was most resourceful with a knife at her throat. A proverb uttered by her great 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 grandmother.
This is where I have my first note because again, something that was there all through the Jordan times, and maybe this was the intention, but the whole rivalry culture, assassin attempt thing is way overdone at this point. Because I mean, think of it this way. She's thinking of having Matt thrown out because he's not a rival, but she has the Death Watch guards. Anybody who has rivals like that needs a trusted group of people or a trusted person.
Hmm.
And this whole, oh, it's not right that he's not trying to kill me is just stupid. Knowing that lots of people are trying to kill you is one thing, which is kind of the impression I got with Jordan. But the they should be trying to kill me is completely different
Hmm.
because nobody would be a leader in this society. Not that it's not they wouldn't try to be a leader, but you wouldn't be for long if everybody's trying to kill you because you would have coalitions come and kill you and then they'd start killing each other. And it's just, it doesn't, it gets to the point of ridiculous where it stops making sense.
Hmm. Well, that's I had this thought that I hadn't had before when I was reading this. I've used this analogy before that I think to me one of the possible influences of the Seanchan were what the samurai became. Because under the Tokugawa shogunate, they had centuries of peace and they stopped being warriors and they became bureaucrats and politicians. And the fighting was more political than literal, than martial. And that also, because of that, that led to what became a warping and a distorting of the samurai code, of the Bushido code, into a psychopathic death cult, which is what we see in the build up to World War II and during World War II. And I'm wondering, you look at her thought process here of what she sees as proper, as the right way of things, as um and Sanchin culture as a whole. And I had this thought, is this strange distorting and warping of proper order, is this all stemming from the fact that the Sanchin Empire at its root was founded by Baalzamon, or its founding was influenced by Baalzamon? And could that little earworm that he planted to start all this, could that be, is maybe one of Jordan's meta points and long running themes that since we first saw the Sanchin way back in book two was these people are a destructive distortion of our idea of law and order because they have taken it to this logical but insane extreme.
Yeah, but just like we talk about with the size of the armies and the distortion of everything, feeding the Trollocs, all of these things, we have to think this is where evolutionary training comes in because it helps you think in long timelines. And that society that's poisoned from the beginning wouldn't have lasted 1,000 years. You
Well,
would
but
have
if
needed a strong leader type like a Genghis Khan to take over all of Shanshan.
mhm.
You,
but
which would require some stability at the top.
but if that poison was just a drop, it was, it was a slow growing cancer.
Hmm.
So yeah, that cancer was always there, but it took a very long time to metastasize. And we do know from what little we do know of Sanchin history, the continent was a fractured mess. And so a lot of that uh, infighting and backstabbing was probably deeply ingrained before the empire was founded, because that's how we know from what little we know, that is how this small army of Hawkwings was able to eventually conquer the whole continent, was you eat an elephant one bite at a time, and playing these different factions off against each other as you slowly absorbed them.
Yeah, it just with that leadership style on the top, we see it in another culture in this same Rand land is Karhine.
Mm-hmm.
and the culture of the people reflect the leadership culture.
Hmm.
And so it just, yes, you would, I could see like a more violent version of the game of houses, which maybe that's what he was going for. And it
Hmm.
and it actually looked that way when we had them from a distance. But once we got in her head right here, it took on a totally different form. Now, again, her comment, I wish he would be a rival to me. That's stupid. In Karheim, you always are paranoid of the other rulers, but you're still cooperative. And they're always looking for allegiances and alliances, I should say. So, yeah, why not revel in the fact that I have an alliance that I can trust?
Yeah, I think this may be Sanderson not getting people because to your point, what would have made more sense there would be her thinking not in terms of he should be a rival of this is confusing. This is supposed to be an alliance, but he treats this like a partnership
Hmm.
because that's what it is to him. You're his wife. You're partners. You're in this together. This isn't a he is not the Prince of Ravens and you are the Empress, may you live forever. Not first and foremost, anyway. That's why he keeps calling you Tuan, because first and foremost, you're his gal, you're his woman, and he's your man. And so something more logical there would have been thoughts along those lines rather than why isn't he my rival? Because that's a good point. That doesn't make any sense. But again, part of her worldview doesn't make sense because it has gone to an extreme so that she anything that is not her way is chaos. Because a few pages later, at the end of this point of view section, um, when the reports come in about what's happening to the White Tower army, and Matt is saying, "Okay, we need to go." Is he keeps reiterating strongly on page 437 as he says, light to wand, you gave him your word, and he's emphasizing that. That's not chaos. That's literally the opposite of
Hmm.
chaos.
Yeah.
Is your word is your bond is I mean that is why bearing false witness is one of the 10 commandments,
Hmm.
because
And
that
and
is a very quick way to destroy a society.
assassins and tearing up treaties at a whim is actually chaos.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because I think Jordan intended his, again, I bring up Ulysses S. Grant, the I've only successful in war and marriage, right? And if you take Matt as what he was supposed to be, you could have had moments here in the battle plan and in their marriage where he's saying, you're looking at things the way you want them to be. This is
Mhm.
the way they actually are in the moment. And that's where Matt should be as the battle general, because that's where he was for many, many, many books. And that's the kind of person he is. But when you only write when your only experience with people is writing them, you can make them what you want them to be. And that's Sanderson's experience. Whereas he doesn't know how to write somebody who can think outside of that,
Mhm.
where he looks at things as they are. And that should have been the approach. And that could look like chaos to someone who's very heuristic in the way they think, because, well, it has to be this way because that's the way we've always done it. We all know these people. It has to be that way because that's the way it's done,
Mhm.
right? And that's why Matt didn't fit in the Two Rivers quite well, because it was very traditional. That's why he wanted to be in the world. That's why even when it made sense for him to want to never go back to the Two Rivers when Perrin went back to the Two Rivers, because hey, I'm exploring right now. I'm seeing the world as it is, and I don't want to go back to that. This could have worked here, and you could have paralleled the marriage and the war right at the same time. He could have been like, Galgun, your plan is based on past successes from many, many, many years ago, based on your ability to have the superior force.
Mhm.
Right now, we've got this chaotic mess. Let's look at what's there and make the best of it. And then when Tuan's like, you shouldn't be doing this, he'd be like, that's the way you think it should be. But this is what we're dealing with right here.
Mhm.
And you could have had both of those things going on at once and it would have been great.
And I think maybe that was supposed to be the point. It just wasn't executed especially well because this scene ties to uh the where we're going to finish in chapter 26 when Fortuana and Egwene confront each other. That though there's this connection there and this follow on of Tawan's idea of what is proper and what is order, what brings order, and also is proper morally, versus Egwene pointing out this is the way the world you're in works, and you're trying to impose something that we find abhorrent.
Mm-hmm.
And then Matt steps into the middle of all that. So I think there was supposed to be a connection there between these scenes, but I feel like it one it it's just it's just enough off mark that it doesn't sink in, and then also Matt's buffoonery is distracting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, then we get a fun scene of Lan killing lots of things, which I have no thoughts about, except that
Yeah,
Lan
I
continues to
think
kill
yeah,
lots of
I
things.
think they're just setting up the Agomar stuff there.
Yeah, they're starting to set up what's going on with the generals here, or well, that's they're starting to reveal the actions, because the real setup was Lanfear pointing out to Perrin that
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
that
we're
was your
getting to the
father-in-law's
punchline
dreams. We're
because
getting
we
to the
do keep
punchline
going
here.
back and forth between the generals now. So
Um, then we get an Elaine scene where uh we get another soliloquy that is
my
overly
my
belabored.
my note on that was, does Sando write Kamala's speeches?
I haven't watched
Which
the debate yet. I'm not looking forward to it.
which is the
So,
one that uh,
oh geez.
if
But
we have the light again, we must make it ours. We must
oh jeez,
reclaim it and cast it out the shadow. I was reading it in her voice and it was killing me. It was killing me.
it was pretty bad. And then
Oh,
at the
this is the one. Our blood is our land. This place is ours, and we claim it. And our fathers, mothers, and our children. Our blood is our life. We have come to give across the world. Other armies are pushing back. We will not retreat. Our task is to spend our blood, to die advancing.
it's appropriate that he consults with and helps with the production of the series, because this meandering speech reminds, it's not as bad, but it reminds me of that awful scene. Have you seen the clip of the scene from season 1 of Rings of Power where Galadriel's brother says, "Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?" What?
Yeah.
It's like someone really thought this sounded wise and clever and, you know, moving, and that this is something that's going to be on a motivational poster on someone's wall, and it's no, it's so stupid.
Well, I
Oh,
got a
you,
great parallel here. We all know the Australian breakdancer story.
oh, geez, yes.
This is a person who wasn't a real breakdancer. She learned about breakdancing in school. We have reached the point of screenwriting where they weren't real screenwriters. They learned how to screenwrite in school. It's like when I get a new trainer fresh out of, their undergrad, or and I have to mentor them, you have to give them the speech of, okay, yes, I understand that you know the textbook, but this is kind of how it works in the real world. So follow along for a little while until you kind of see a little bit more of that, and then you can start having more freedom on your own. There's a growing period when you get to the real world. These people don't have that because they're coddled. They come out of college with their screenwriting degree in whatever communications and art or whatever, and they have to write a script. And they're like, "Oh, I can write a good speech. That sounded good to me." And it looks like the breakdancer from Australia.
Hello.
I'm here. Okay, all right.
Okay.
I hit my cord. Sorry. I will fix this one day, but I think it was offline. Me and Heath talked about the problem with finding these chords now.
Mhm.
Yep.
All right. Adding to the nonsense of the whole scene then is that after that speech that sounds silly, then there's this moment where Elaine puts her foot down and like I think the thing that bothered me the most about this scene is her being able to feel through the bond that Brigitte is shocked. Okay, first of all, why? This isn't new. And secondly, this look, nothing matters if we don't win here, and I'm one of the few people strong enough to channel right now. She's not wrong. The problem is, one, she goes way over the top in how she says it to Brigitte, and two, because she's been a queen bee so often, she's not the hero in this moment. She's still being a queen bee. We can't, you know, forget the disaster that she led her people into when she got captured by the Black Ajah and how
Hmm.
many people she got killed doing that. It was well over 1,000 people were killed trying to rescue her.
Sure would be useful right now.
Yeah, you know, the those couple of Aes Sedai that were with her, their warders, those are worth a lot of soldiers. And then plus those 1,000 of the Queen's Guard who are in such short supply. Yeah, sure would be handy to have those people now. So that just felt dumb and fell totally flat. Um, the the thing that actually jumped out at me the most in the rest of this chapter is then the next scene is switches to Rodel Iturralde as he's getting ready to beat back the first assault of Trollocs as they've taken Thakandar and now they're making their defenses and you know getting ready for the Trollocs to try and attack them. On page 446, there's this thing that I had completely forgotten about, which is that Zaida, the mistress of the ships of the Windfinders, is there because she insisted on being wherever Rand was, and there are a bunch of Windfinders there as well. Um, and I had completely forgotten about this. That Zaida says the attack has begun. The attack? The bringer of gales, Zaida said, looking towards the sky. The father of storms, he would destroy you with the force of his ire. Your people can handle it, right? The Windfinders already confront him with the power of the Bowl of the Winds. If it were not so, he would have destroyed us all with tempests already. And she's not wrong. She's not just boasting there because I think we see that when we shift to Perrin's point of view, where he's in the world of dreams. And so there is no Bowl of the Winds, that storm is raging unchecked. And he literally has to put a wall of still air around himself or be blown off the mountain. You know, earlier we saw that the storm had scoured away the wall of Tyr, right? So I had this thought that, wait a minute, Jordan has said in interviews and in Q&As that, yeah, there are red herrings in the book, in numerous red herrings in the books, that he purposely set certain things up to seem important that ultimately end up not being important. And one of the things that we kind of griped about was how the Windfinders kind of get forgotten about. The Sea Folk kind of get forgotten about. And it's like they're supposed to be this big deal and then nothing happens. Like one of the last things Jordan does with the Sea Folk is Logain coming in and declaring, mourn if you must, but mourn on the way to the last battle.
Hmm.
And then it's this big moment, but nothing really comes of it. And I'm wondering if this got lost in the shuffle with Sanderson and if the bargain with a capital B was actually always supposed to be a red herring from RJ, that it's the bargain is a big deal to the sea folk. And so he writes it as a big deal, but the bargain's not what's actually important. The bowl is what was important because to them, it was an afterthought. It was something that was thrown into another bargain. But were it not for the bowl being found by Elaine and Nynaeve, being given to the Windfinders as part of their bargain, and then the Windfinders being here, this army wouldn't be able to stand. They wouldn't be able to stand and protect Rand. So it just dawned on me, hey, I wonder if the bargain was always intended to be kind of a red herring from Jordan. That yes, this sounds like a big deal because to your point about Tuan, they think it's a big deal. It's a big deal to them, but it's not a big deal to the world.
Well, I think it kind of is a big deal for what happens after. Because remember, he was also trying to, there was the one of the
Mm,
big parallel themes was he's trying to preserve something after and not
yeah,
have another breaking.
true.
And he knows what the chaos after the last battle is going to be. And if we have these bargains, then at least we have some sort of skeleton to build from.
All right. And then on to chapter 25, which is um I don't have any thoughts about Egwene. She's still being bitchy when it comes to Rand, which is dumb and annoying because he's a little bit busy, honey, kind of doing important stuff. Um, Also, the other thing that seemed odd to me, actually, now that before I move on to Rand, is this is from Sawan's point of view. She knows all about Min Farshaw,
Hmm.
as does Egwene. So why do they find it odd that he sent Min to deliver this message and also go on to the Seanchan? It with her abilities and with how much Rand trusts her,
She hasn't
they
gone on to the Shanshan yet.
no.
Yeah,
But
Egwene doesn't see that.
okay,
Yeah,
um
because
okay, so they don't know that part of it
Brian
yet.
put her to work as a clerk.
But the fact that Min would be sent shouldn't be surprising, and Sawan seems to be surprised or confused by it, as well as Egwene, but it shouldn't be. In fact, you should be putting Min to work, not Brine, because you know what she
Hmm.
can do.
Yeah.
Um, then we move on to Rand as he actually steps into the cave. Um, and we get this cool moment right off the bat where he's able to impose his will, which is kind of a tease, a bit of a foreshadow of the battle to come. That no, Rand can actually stand up to the Dark One because even here, where he is strongest, he's able to exert his will and control over the pattern to keep the cave from shrinking like the Dark One likes to do.
Well, and we did have setup for this because remember he did this in Morden's Dream Shard.
Yes, that's a
So
good point
even
too.
though he was in his opponent's home field, he was
Hmm.
able to impose his will. But we
That's a good
also
point.
got how much it wears him out too
Yeah.
in that scene.
And
But
then
he's
here
also,
again,
yeah, he's on. It's on the line now. You just put it all in.
he leaves a little pool of blood where he's standing when he does that. But the more interesting thing is he has this thought that so this is page 454, right in the middle of this scene. Um, Down they went, an odd sensation came to mind. One of the women was in trouble. Was it Elaine, Avienda? He could not tell. The warping of this place affected the bond. He was moving through time differently than they, and he lost his sense of where they were. Um, I think that's a bit of a clue as to the nature of what is happening here, because I don't know if, again, to Scott's comment, I find Jordan's fingerprints more heavily on these Rand scenes, and I think that was on purpose because this is, I mean, again, the whole idea for the series came from the very end. Just the very last scene popped into his head, and he saw it fully formed, and then he worked backwards from who was this person and what's going on here. And so he really cared about the ending, and I don't think it was just the ending scene. I think it was the ending of the confrontation between Rand and the Dark One. All right, so maybe I'm reading too much into this, but people with physics degrees and science fiction nerds know that time isn't just time. It's not just the ticking of your watch, it is space time. And so I'm thinking that Rand's comments on time moving differently is to further show that reality itself, space time, is warping, is being warped, is being distorted here throughout the whole world, but strongest here at this point where basically there's a miniature black hole.
Hmm. Yeah, and gravity has something to do with it. I remember they did an experiment with an atomic clock, and they had put it on a plane and went
Mm-hmm.
to a certain altitude. And because it was so far above the center of the Earth, it actually time actually did work different. When they finally landed it, the atomic clock was not set to the other atomic clocks. So yeah, it was something to do with gravity, and someone explained this to me, and it was physics beyond me, where you can shoot a rocket out, and if you can get it to turn around and shoot back at a certain trajectory, it would actually go back in time. But it's not possible with the technology we have, but it's possible in the realm of physics.
It's out there stuff, man.
Yeah.
All right. Then let's see, we've got a land scene. Again, teasing that something's going on with Agomar. And then we switch to Perrin and uh him trying to fight Slayer and him in the world of dreams, and they have gone to Shao Gul in the world of dreams, but it's bleeding over, and they're able to see strange things.
Hmm.
Um, and so the second page here, where is it? Yeah. So when he actually goes up to the pit of doom, he can actually see, but they look like they're frozen in time. He can actually see Rand and Morden locked in combat and see the two women there with him, Nynaeve and Moiraine. Um, but I think this is the confirmation that the dream world and the real world are mostly merged here. Because even before, a little later on, Perrin is going to actually be able to talk to Nynaeve, and she can't see him, but she can clearly hear him.
Hmm.
But the confirmation is here though, because if the worlds weren't merged, why would Slayer be standing in the world of dreams about to shoot an arrow at Rand? Because it's gonna impact him. It's because he has the chance to kill him or severely injure him here. So what reality and the world of dreams is merging here, but not just this reality, because a couple pages later, when Perrin and Slayer are actually fighting, uh, he sees strange images that kind of form out of the dust. So it's on page 461 for me, halfway down with the paragraph that starts with Slayer sneered at Perrin, then lunged. The two of them danced back and forth, surrounded by churning dust that formed the faces and bodies of people struggling for their lives in another place, another world. And my first thought there was this just a literary flourish, or is that a literal another world? Like, not only are the dream world and the real world merging, but the mirror worlds are also merging. And we kind of
Mm.
get confirmation of that just a little bit farther down, where um Perrin sees a couple paragraphs down. With a start, he realized that some of those impressions weren't completely human. He saw a couple that were distinctly snake-like in appearance, though they faded quickly. Does this place reflect other worlds? He wondered, not certain what else to make of the phantoms.
Hmm.
The other
And
thought there, though, is that
it alludes you that
snake-like.
Aelfin or Elfin, yeah.
Yeah, is wait, what are they doing? Where are they and what's going on here? Because that would be weird. That adds another level of, whoa, what the heck is going on here if their world is also merging, because so far as we can tell, their world exists completely outside of this world, which would presumably include the mirror worlds as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and why is this world so important as the hub? Because
Yeah.
presumably, if you get closer, there's only one Rand and Moradin fighting. And why were they? Did they manifest differently and then just all come together the closer they got to the boar? Or was this the pivotal world that is supposed to bring it all together? I
Or
yeah, I think it's
or are
the
there numerous Rands and Moradins overlapping each other? Because I just remembered when he confronts Morden right before Morden attacks, uh, Morden makes the point that you can fail. The prophecies mean nothing if I defeat you. And Rand in his head thinks, I've won again, Luce Theron,
Mhm.
thinking back to the mirror worlds.
Well,
So,
which is yeah, that was my point about them all converging. And by the time Perrin saw them, they were already in one spot.
mm-hmm,
Whereas had he gone in earlier, he might have
yeah.
seen the dust motes of them all coming together.
Um, then we get another like, whoa, what the heck moment here in this Perrin scene where he turns the two red veiled Aiel into uh gibbering morons. He basically gives them a virtual lobotomy, and Lanfear shows up again and says that they've been turned. Um, and gives us some hints and clues as to who and what these people are. But what's interesting is that Perrin thinks to try and, well, if I can turn their brain off, maybe I can fix it. Um, and so he has this thought, turned, Perrin thought, like those men at the Black Tower. He frowned, walking up and taking the head of one of the men in his hands. Could he will the man back to the light? If he could be forced to evil, could he be restored? Which is certainly something, you know, uh, I mean, Perrin had that thought earlier, is that, that repulsed him more than anything, because choice is what makes a man. The ability to choose is what makes a man a man. And to have that taken from you was an abomination, that hit Perrin especially hard. Perrin hit something vast as he pushed against the minds of these men. His will bounced free like a twig used to try beating down an iron gate. Perrin stumbled back. What the heck was that? Was that the Dark One itself, or his essence, or something like that? I mean, what in the world does that say about what it means to be turned? Is there any clues here as to what in the world is going on?
Well, if we keep thinking of consciousness and what it means to be turned, like it took it's almost like we've discussed this, that maybe it's the souls of the Murdral that are
Mm,
actually in the person's head again at this point, which we know don't have souls. They have the stolen souls that are warped and twisted. So maybe there's an emptiness there that was from the Murdral vessel, which would have put the actual soul in the Murdral that died.
hmm. So what he's pushing against is just pure
Nothingness.
nothingness.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the dark one. Pure nothingness.
That would certainly be vast, if especially if you're talking about like the vastness of the entropy of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Last chapter for today, chapter 26. Um
Oof.
I don't know what to think about this chapter. It is better than what's going on in chapter 24. Um
I don't know. I put Matt one line in and stupid conversation.
Yeah.
His first line.
It starts out well, and then when Matt comes in, it's like, oh geez, come on. Why?
I mean, how's the White Tower? Still white, I guess.
Yeah.
You could have done without that. It could have ended with glad to hear you escaped those shards.
Hmm.
Period. Quotation. Egwene looked at Matt. That would have been fine.
Yep. The the initial incredulity from Egwene, the Tuon being Tuon and annoyed at Matt for not knowing things that he couldn't possibly know. Um, because there's if it weren't for that little bit there, and then a little farther down, he kind of ruins it, but he actually makes a pretty good funny here of Egwene's reaction of uh looking back and forth, finally unable to do anything else, she burst out laughing. You married Matrim Cawthon? Um, it actually works pretty well because it is perfectly in keeping with Egwene's character. It is brief. He doesn't belabor it, and then it gets back to them verbally and philosophically sparring with each other, which for the most part is pretty good. And like I said, I think it's supposed to tie to the opening of chapter 24 and her idea of what proper order means, of what everything in its proper place means, and Egwene throwing back at her, all right, well, put your money where your mouth is and put that collar around your neck.
Mhm. Yeah, but this is another one where we talked about in the last episode. My note was the world's on the line and you're having a little bitch fight.
Mm-hmm.
How about we'll talk about all this after
Mm-hmm.
we destroy the dark one, you know?
Yep. uh but it works because in their own minds it makes perfect sense for them to do this. They can't let this, potential adversary and threat and very real threat to their people, that they have to keep them in check. So
Oh,
it makes
I
perfect
didn't say
sense
this
that,
part wasn't in
yeah,
perfect unity with human nature, but it's just the frustrating part that it is human nature to do this. That
which is why my note is on page 471. He made a funny referring to Sanderson, but then my next note is on page 476, and he ruined it. And then he ruined it because it is perfectly within keeping of their nature, these characters, and also human nature, that they would have this standoff here and try and kind of bluff each other into, you know, I'll take my ball and go home, and I don't care about the last battle. But it's also perfectly within keeping of his nature for Matt to step into the middle when it starts to get out of hand. And you know, even his comment of "let's be civil, ladies, don't make me throw the pair of you over my knee." Yeah, that's something Matt would say. He doesn't give a darn about titles. And he's also going to be pretty annoyed at this situation because, to your point, hey, we have a last battle happening here. Can we get to it? We have important things to worry about. But then on the next page, he
but
he just keeps flogging the dead horse.
let's not ruin that moment though, because this is where I had my accident, Jordan or Sando game here.
Okay.
So comes in and stops the fight, and he actually has a good moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly why Matt is the right person for this job. So again, is this scene an accident? Was it planned by Jordan, or did Sanderson actually know what he was doing and write it in? I'm leaning on it was a plan by Jordan, but Sanderson wrote it because of what you said. He comes in and ruins it with stupid banter right
Hmm.
afterwards. Uh, but Matt is the perfect person to stop this fight because this fight is exactly what Eridhol did to become Shadar Logoth.
Mm,
He's held the dagger. He has been part of it. He went through that whole 3 book progression of trying to escape the dagger that was Shadar Logoth. That was the human evil.
hmm.
That is why they couldn't defeat the shadow. Menatherin, it was destroyed because Eridol had this about them. This distrust, this we won't cooperate. We won't fight the greater evil because we're all in our own head. He has carried the essence of more death for a long time. He's the perfect person to stop this fight because that's exactly what it was. We won't help you because even though that's the greater evil.
I hadn't made that connection. That's a good point. Of just as surely as Egwene being made Domine so impacted her character from the very beginning and set her on the path to get to where she's at now, Matt, being Matt, and picking up that dagger, set him on the path to get to where he's at now
In
as
fact,
well.
if it was Jordan and it was on purpose, this would have been a good time for him to recap that experience for a second. He could have said something in the old tongue and they look at him just look at him like what? And then say, "Oh, what we relied on the forces of Eridol to save us in Manatharin, but they couldn't agree to, fighting the greater
Hmm.
evil. However, someone with better language skills than me could write it. And all the ladies, but no, we had to have stupid banter after anyway instead.
You know what? That put a pin in that because one of my least favorite scenes with Matt is going to happen here towards the end of the book where it does reference the dagger. So I think you're onto something because I think eh, that
So
is coming full circle and
that might
Jordan
be
is
evidence
tying
of
up
on
that
purpose,
thread.
but Jordan, written
Yeah,
by Sanderson.
but the scene just really falls flat for me. But I hadn't thought that, yeah, this is a thread that Jordan is purposely coming in to tie up here and bringing all of these things full circle that has been going on for 14 books now. Yeah. Um, I didn't really have any thoughts on the end of this chapter, which goes back to Elaine, and we realize that something's wrong with Bashir,
Mm.
and Elaine thinks that he's turned to the dark or been turned or is a dark friend or whatever. The only thought I had is that I like that it's Tam is the one who figures this all out, basically.
Hmm.
I like that it's him who thinks, you know, one, he notices something doesn't smell right here, but then two, he's not afraid to go out and figure it out.
Hmm.
So, and then to Scott's point about the battles, then we get way too much of the, you know, somebody playing a total war game or a tabletop miniatures game and you know let me move my cavalry to this location here
Yeah.
and we get a little too much of that, which I think.
Yeah, this is okay. So, Elaine, you've got lots of skills. You're a talented leader. You're all of this. This is where you say, Talmanes, you're in charge. Because Talmanes is the most experienced battle
Mm,
leader of the ones that were there. And then Talmanes spits out those same things.
yeah,
That would have been a lot better. But Elaine, all of a sudden being a master general, that's why Sanderson can't write battles because he
it's
thinks
a
he
good
could be a
point.
master general.
That's a good point. That and he he did the right thing earlier because that's that's what Brian compliments her on, where she's saying, I didn't do anything. And he makes the point that no one expects you to be a general. So she
Hmm.
wasn't being a general when they had their strategy meeting. She was just asking the right questions, making the right points, and then bridging the gap whenever there was a disagreement. That's why I made the analogy to Eisenhower there. And now all of a sudden, see, I was looking at it just
I think he knows.
literally.
I think he kind of knows the right thing, but he can't help
Mhm.
himself.
Mm,
Where he just turns off that part of his brain
yeah.
that thinks well and just like, oh,
It,
cool moment. I get to
yeah.
write another speech.
We, whereas it should have been, this is what we need to do. And then Tolmanes and Tam saying, okay, then this is how we accomplish that.
Yeah, you could have had it a two-part thing. Like, okay, Tommy's been going, okay, we need to get the dragons here, but how do we protect them? Tam goes, okay, I can put the two rivers guys
Mhm.
here, and had Bale there. He's like, well, this is how my people could be best used in this situation. All of those things together, and you could have had a combination general that would have
Mhm.
worked there. But I don't think Sando could help himself uh, in just having a boss bitch moment.
Mm. Mhm. That's a good point because there are other times with other characters where he's much better at ending a scene. Or like, look at one of the things I was going to point out, and I got sidetracked, is the scene where it switches from Rand to Lan when Moradin charges at him. One of the things it made me think of is one of the reasons the climactic battle in Return of the Jedi is so engaging is because you have three different battles going on, and Lucas and his editors were so good at making those transitions. So you would transition from action to action, but it would be a different action. So it wouldn't get boring. It's something he failed to do in the prequels is there was too much of the sameness going on and it made your brain glaze over. Whereas in Return of the Jedi, you got these great transitions of, the ATST blowing up trees, and then all of a sudden it switches to, fighters shooting at each other up in space. And that is what that felt like to me with, and Moradin charged him. And then it cuts to a completely different scene, but it cuts to Lan executing a form and killing a Trolloc. And so it cuts from action to action. And then even there in that land scene, it ends very succinctly with, I'm going to go get to the bottom of this, and then done. And with some of the other characters, Elaine especially, I should keep an eye out for if he does this with any other characters. He really belabors the point. He cannot end on a nice, concise, pithy moment.
Mhm.
And the more I think back on her previous scenes, the more that stands out, and should look and see if he does that with anyone else. Because I feel like he doesn't do it with Egwene. I feel like he's able to, the only thing that is overly belabored there is the Egwene Gawain dynamic, which there's only so much he can do with that because it was awful to begin with. All right. Well, that is all the thoughts I have on that, and we will see how far we can get next time. Um, Wanted to get farther today, but I had lots of stuff going on and didn't read as far as I
Well, it
wanted
is your
to.
birthday. Happy birthday.
Yeah, there's that. I was busy trying to get my birthday dinner ready and stuff.
Well, and as since Heath is the pessimistic one of us, it is only fitting his birthday's on 9/11, but you know, just
Yep.
Fortuana would call that an omen.
I cannot ignore the omens. I can't also cannot
But the
ignore the
question
urge to
is,
go pee. So
was you being born the omen, or were the things that happened the omen?
don't ask me that because I'm going to go with the most pessimistic part of that, most pessimistic option there. All right. Well, we will see y'all presumably this weekend to do some oof to get ourselves canceled, probably.
To get ourselves canceled, and we still got that stupid debate to talk about because I don't think we have to belabor too many points on that because I'll just give him a B and her a C. I think that's appropriate. It wasn't anything. I don't think it swayed
I
any
I think what
any
we're going to
poll
talk about
numbers.
with with gender and sex and puberty, I think that's actually more important than the debate because to me, the whole reason I've been on this topic is the idea that does the debate even matter? Do the commercials even matter? Or are things so culturally ingrained that things can't be shifted?
Well, I just saw some numbers today, and this might be something we include in that in voting blocks. And I'm not quite 100%. I'm not going to give the exact numbers, but it was married men was like high 50s to married women uh, was married men, because Republican, Democrat, and I'll just say them in that order every time. So Republican first, Democrat second. Married men was like 58 to 39%. One of those two. Then the married women was closer to center, but it was still 50s, mid 50s for Republican and mid 40s for Democrat. And single men was low to mid 50s and mid 40s. And then the last one was single women. And in that same order, it was low 30s to high 60s. So it's the biggest discrepancy in all the different voting blocks in that
Mhm.
one direction. And if you didn't have that big discrepancy in this one voting block, this would be a slam dunk. And I like James Lindsay's answer to that. He said, well, maybe you should just learn how to talk to these people. And that's part of the problem.
Yep. Especially since more women in raw numbers, more women tend to vote than men.
Hmm.
So
More
that's
more
it.
older people and more women,
Hmm.
which is two blocks that hurt the red side.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get into that, and then we'll have to talk some football to have some fun. So we'll
Hey, it was
talk
a
a
good
little
fantasy
football.
week for me.
Well, it's you and me are matched up this week, so
Oh, that'll be fun.
I foresee nonsense and disasters on all sides.
All right. Talk to you later.